So that's it. That's the end of season 2 for House of the Dragon. And I have a very difficult time putting my thoughts about this season into words in a way that doesn't sound like I'm overly critical or in a way that suggests that I thought this was the best season of House of the Dragon or Game of Thrones or anything revolving around the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, George R. R. Martin's works. So, one issue that I definitely have that is really disrupting the way I'm experiencing House of the Dragon is that I read the books. I read Fire and Blood, the source material for The Dance of the Dragons or House of the Dragon, or the original novella, The Princess and the Queen, that covers The Dance of the Dragons. And when I watch this show, I'm seeing certain things that are being discarded from the source material. Some of those things I agree with. Not all of them. Some of them actually bother me a lot because it starts to change the trajectory of some of these characters. That makes me curious, which you could argue is a good thing, as to where is this story actually going now, because it's definitely not going to match my expectations based on what I know from reading the book. However, there's a couple moments here in episode 8, the finale for season 2, and really throughout the first 2 seasons. If you look back at this in retrospect, you'll see that, similar to Game of Thrones, there are moments in this show where the show becomes very aware that it has an audience. And it's almost kind of fourth wall breaking, where it does things narratively that no story would naturally do, but it does it because it knows it has somebody watching. There's a moment that kind of took me out of the episode, and I had to stop and kind of rewind and get my train of thought back because it is disruptive. And for you, it may have felt like a very small thing. But when I heard Tywin Lannister get called Tywin, that really bothered me. And I know it's something small, and maybe it seems too subtle to care about. But it's one of those things where House of the Dragon references Game of Thrones. And we're going to get into Daemon's visions here in a second too. But when that happened, it's like, hey man, I know that this is a prequel series. Everybody watching knows that this show is a prequel to Game of Thrones. And that's fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But you don't have to remind us. You don't have to attach everything back to Game of Thrones. I enjoyed the musical scores, and I don't mind the intro, the opening credits for House of the Dragon, mirroring the music from Game of Thrones. That's fine. That doesn't mean it can't be its own thing. It just means, hey, this takes place in the same universe, but the show should feel free to do its own thing. Now, I don't know if it's Ryan Condal. I don't know that it's Sarah Hess or who it is that keeps saying it's probably somebody. It's probably somebody, some HBO executive that looks at some sort of data or looks at some sort of analytics from Game of Thrones and the overlap between that fan base and the fan base for House of the Dragon. I'm not sure what they're looking at. I don't know. I don't have that insight. I don't want you to think that I do. But this feels like studio decisions. I don't like things that feel like studio decisions because it definitely breaks the immersion for the show. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about House of the Dragon in a way that says that this show, this series is doomed. I don't think that. I just think that there's a certain level of quality or originality that I don't know that this show will ever be able to get to. And it's because it's attached to Game of Thrones. And it's because of what I think is probably studio interference. And I don't know for sure. But there's moments where, what's the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this scene? Is this a spectacle? What is going on here? Why are we moving away from the source material? The source material, admittedly, I am not a huge fan of as far as trying to adapt it. It's fine in a vacuum as a complementary world-building book to the main A Song of Ice and Fire series. It's fine on its own. I don't think that it needs to be taken super seriously as far as being adapted as a general outline of the history of Westeros, or the Targaryens in Westeros. But when you start breaking away from that, and a character like Nettles is clearly not going to show up. We are not getting Nettles. I see no reason to think that we're getting Nettles. If you haven't confirmed this already, I think that you're maybe, being a little naive, or maybe a little delusional if your expectation is that we're going to see something similar in this show. I think that's done for. Rhaena has taken the place of Nettles. To what degree? How is that going to work narratively? I'm not really sure. I heard other people talk about reviews. So this episode was spoiled. It was leaked. I watched the leaks, and then I actually ended up seeing the full episode a couple days ago and watched it again tonight. And, there is a purpose for levity, especially in a series like Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon, that can kind of keep things from getting too dark, from getting it too bleak or overly serious. And I think levity is important. Off the White, I think, is that source of levity that could be very useful. It didn't work for me, though, here in the finale of this season. And it's really because, like, I'm listening and I'm watching it and I'm wondering, like, what is going on here? What is happening? Like, I like that. I like it enough, but it's like, I'm listening to Off the White, and I'm not trashing his purpose here in episode 8, or that, that sense of levity for the story. But when I go back and I look at the rest of the season, or even if I go back to last season, like, we could have used a little bit more of this sprinkled in. So for it to jump in here now with a character that we're not super familiar with, I mean, all we know about him is he's kind of non-serious. And his attitude for claiming a dragon, I mean, that's kind of fascinating that he wouldn't remain kind of this jokester, or this person that doesn't take anything seriously, doesn't have a whole lot of respect. And I understand that the Blacks are kind of in a desperate place. They cannot afford to lose a dragon rider, so all hands on deck, no matter who they are. I just, for the series to not have it up to this point and then all of a sudden introduce this, like, moment of joking around, the levity, it just, it felt kind of jarring in a way for me. Now, I might think differently after I rewatch the episode again. I mean, this is my second time seeing it, and it still troubled me a little bit. But the constant... I want to get to Daemon now. That's the biggest thing that bothers me. I remember a few days ago when the leaks first occurred, I listened to another... a couple guys, Preston Jacobs and Red Team Review. I listened to their podcast in regards to the leaks. And, I'd like to have something additional to say, or something I could expand on with the sentiments that they had in that podcast. The lack of agency for the character Daemon. I mean, it troubles me, not just for his character only either, with the character Helena as well. When we start focusing on destiny, and not only that, we're attaching it to Game of Thrones. You get the vision of Daenerys. You get the vision of the White Walkers. I know that it's going to be impossible to separate House of the Dragon from Game of Thrones. I know that. But this insistence on don't forget about, not only don't forget about Game of Thrones, but we remember how that ended. And if we're going to insist on, hey, everything's destiny, which means, these characters are not going to act in a way that seems natural necessarily to who their characters are. It disrupts their arcs. For Daemon, I felt that we were accomplishing something with his character throughout this season, where these visions mean something, where they have an impact, and his reflection on those visions and on his inner thoughts and his past and his relationships with Rhaenyra and with his brother Viserys. I thought those visions combined with that we would start to see a turn for him. I didn't think that it was leading up to a vision that says, hey, nothing is in your hands. You have a part to play your part, and that's it. You are a character of destiny, and that is it. You have no control. You don't get to decide anything in this story. That's already been determined. And, in the podcast I was referencing, he speaks on this a lot, where it's like you take away that agency, where, narratively, I don't think this direction is nearly as interesting. Either they fulfill the destiny as intended or as expected, or something changes. They think that they're changing it. Things are going to be different than they had expected. And then at the last moment, what they realize is like, no, actually, you went down this path, but it loops back around and it exits right where you were trying to avoid ending up, saying that no matter what you do, the conclusion of this story was always going to be the same, and there's nothing you could do to change it. Helena all but says that. I mean, I shouldn't even say all but says that. She does say that. She says that to Aemond. And talking about his death in the God's Eye. I don't understand what we are accomplishing narratively, or as far as like anticipation. Are we not supposed to be excited for the future of this story? Forget about the show and the spectacles and the upcoming battles that I'm sure a lot of you are excited to see. If you're a book reader, I'm sure you're looking forward to this. The Battle of the Gullet is a big one that I think is going to be one of the most impressive things, not only that we've seen on television, but really just on screen in general, including feature films. I think it's going to be a really impressive battle. And if you're not familiar with it, if you read the books, you know what I'm talking about. If not, then I think you'll be impressed by it. And I am curious with show-only fans, if you had not read the source material, or if you haven't read George R. R. Martin's work, a lot of things that are occurring here in House of the Dragon, they are inconsistent with the way George writes his stories. And that was a big problem that, at least for myself, and I know countless others, had a big issue after season 4, and even parts of season 4 of Game of Thrones. From that point on, you kind of changed the trajectory of these characters, but you didn't just change maybe what their ending point is and necessarily change how they got there, but you changed who they were, fundamentally who they were as they were written in the stories. And I don't feel like there's a lot of character development in Fire and Blood, so changing how these characters are, how they behave is one thing, but if you're going to start changing their outcomes and suggesting that it's all kind of determined, I don't see that as very interesting. I'm curious how show only fans are interpreting this. I don't know if you're picking up on that or not. I mean, this isn't a bad show. I mean, I think a lot of what I'm doing here is, book loyalist nitpicking in a way, which is strange. This is the last place I thought I'd be coming from, because I, again, I don't find Fire and Blood, I don't find it to be that spectacular as far as storytelling. It's very intriguing as a complement to the main series, but on its own, I mean, it's just not that compelling of a story. It's just, it just kind of documents events in time in the history of Westeros, and that's really about it. It doesn't really expand on those details. We don't really get to know these characters really intimately. So House of the Dragon does offer us that. So it's been interesting to see some of this, but the Corlys character, there was a scene there with him and Rhaenyra that I felt is there that in a way could have paid off something much better in a lot of ways. I still enjoy the scene. I still enjoy Corlys, basically rededicating himself to Rhaenys and wanting to, stop living for himself and stop living for his own glory. If you watch the inside the episode, after the episode, you listen to the, now this is just my opinion. I think it kind of ruins the show if you listen to these people talk about the show. If I need you to interpret what was happening during the show and it's inconsistent with what I thought I experienced or what with most audiences experienced, then I think there's a disconnect between what the writers are trying to accomplish and what they actually do accomplish, if it has to be explained to us. I'm not saying that always happens. Sometimes it's just cool to hear them recap and it's like, oh man, so that's what you were thinking in that scene. Okay, but with Rhaenyra and Corlys, I thought that should have been a conflict earlier on within the Blacks. I look at Rhaenyra and Allison, and these are two characters that at this point in the story, based on the source material, they really have very little to do right now. So everything that we're getting here with these two characters is an addition. It's an expansion of those characters. And I understand doing that because you need to make these two very interesting, or at least as interesting as possible, especially when they have nothing going on in this source material until, I don't want to spoil anything. But once we get forward here, there's more to go off of. So having an emotional conflict with Corlys and Rhaenyra, where in the book, Corlys blames Rhaenyra for the death of Rhaenys. Now, leaving that conflict out, I felt like they could have added something a little bit more there. I mean, again, some of this stuff is nitpicky, but I think there's been something that you could find in every single one of these episodes where it's like, hey, what are we doing here? Why, it's okay that you changed certain things, but why did you make specifically this change? You would have thought that after episode 8 of season 1, when Rhaenys jumps up through or episode 9, I should say, in season 1, when Rhaenys jumps up through the dragon pit and kills a bunch of small folk, that seemed like that would have been a point of emphasis. It would have been something explored, and it's just not. Season 2 has come and gone, and that ended up meaning nothing as far as her killing the small folk. So it looks like something that was just a mistake. Even in season 2, they say that the small folk loved Meleys. I don't know how that's possible. I'm looking at a video here of Aemond as he's looking upon, he burns the town, which is interesting that they're having him do that now. There's moments in the future that I thought that's where this scene would have taken place. I'm curious to see what they're doing with Aemond. I don't mind them making him full out, almost cartoonishly evil, cartoonishly a villain, because I like the idea of making a character seem almost irredeemable. And let's see if we can maybe flesh that out enough to where we can introduce some humanity to him, make him seem a little bit more relatable, if at all possible. Now, obviously, it didn't happen here in season 2, but that does not mean that cannot happen here moving forward. So, there's some things I don't like about how Aemond was handled here in this season, but I am curious to see where it goes moving forward. That conflict between him and Alicent, I thought was interesting. I thought it was nice to see Allison try to jump in between Aemond and Helena, and Aemond kind of conceding to his mother, even though he truly doesn't have to. He is the power of the kingdom. He has the dragon. Everybody else is at the mercy of Aemond there in King's Landing, and it's interesting how some of these rules or these laws, as Helena being the queen, it seems like there's nothing that Aemond could do about it. But he is regent. It provides him with the powers of, as king. There's nobody that can overstep his authority unless it's Aegon himself. And obviously, in this episode, Aegon's not going to do anything of the such. So, speaking of which, Aegon and Larys, introducing again a little bit of levity there with the way that Aegon kind of speaks to Larys. I know some people have some problems with that. Actually, I thought it was subtle enough that it almost seemed consistent with Aegon as he's presented himself earlier. You think back to, if you go back to episode 2, the conversations that he has with Otto, where he says that, he finds it stimulating to, make some of these decisions. And, there's a moment where Aegon does kind of seem a little bit juvenile with his, with his personality, with his sense of humor. And I think it actually falls in line with his character here, even though he's been brutally hurt and injured. And, when he's talking about basically, castration and kind of joking around there, it seemed a little bit appalling, but it didn't seem inconsistent for the character, at least not to me. If you felt that way, let me know in the comment section. But, we go back and we look at Aegon getting taken out with Larys sneaking him out. I thought that, I don't mind that change. from the book. In the book, when you learn about Aegon's escape, it's all in hindsight. It's way on down the road, but it's actually being told in retrospect, as if, hey, this occurred a while ago, and now we're just catching up. So I actually don't mind them introducing it here. You knew he was going to escape at some point. In the book, it's kind of unclear how he escapes until later it's revealed. Them introducing it here, I think it's okay. It's a small change. I don't mind that. It's one of those things where I want to be clear, not all changes are bad, and I don't think that's a bad change. I don't think that developing this relationship between Larys and Aegon, I don't think that that's bad. So there is, let's jump in here. I'm looking at the scene there with Allison and Renea, and I don't know how I feel about that at all. I really don't. I don't know. It's one of those things, again, where I look at episode 3 of season 2, and that scene of Allison and Renea meeting up just felt too soon. It felt that, all this stuff has happened, and now we're just getting kind of a rehash of that, only Allison has changed her mind. And, okay, I just think that the scene that we got tonight in tonight's episode would have been a lot more impactful here in the season finale had we not had that prior scene. I don't think it added a ton. We've got Renea, though, being developed further. She is going to command the death of a lot of innocents, and she's looking at it as a necessity. But when she proposes, she didn't even say proposes, demands that Allison is going to have to sacrifice Aegon. For those that felt that they are not giving Renea enough of a balance as far as good guy, bad guy, there's nothing about Renea in this episode that makes me feel like she's a good character or a good guy. I think she's a fine character. She's not one of the good people. She's not on the good team, because they're both bad teams. These people are all incredibly flawed. At the end of the day, the real issue, and I think it's important to pay attention to Mysaria here and her interactions with Renea. At the end of the day, these people are not seeing the small folk at all, and they're looked down upon. And I think that kind of segues into a good scene there with Corlys and Alan of Hall. Realizing that Corlys had essentially abandoned his bastard sons, and that he is one of the small folk. I think it's so important with the Dragon Seed plots, with, Hugh the Hammer, Off the White, Adam of Hall, Nettles, who's left out, and we're not going to get her. I just don't. At first, I didn't care. I was one of those people that I thought, however they handle Nettles, we'll figure it out. They'll make it interesting. They're not doing Nettles. I thought it would have been okay not doing Nettles, replacing it with Rhaena. Okay. There's other small folk that are going to play a prominent role. But, the way it's playing out there with Off the White and Hugh the Hammer, and we don't know who, so we don't know who Adam and Alan of Hall's mother is. Is she of Targaryen descent? She must be, I would think. But the idea behind Nettles is that she is not a descendant of Targaryen ancestry, which makes her character so special that she was able to claim Sheepstealer. But instead, what we're getting here is Rhaena claiming Sheepstealer, or probably going to claim Sheepstealer there in the Vale, as a wild dragon who's just up there torching goats and sheep, I guess. I don't know what Sheepstealer's doing up there. So, kind of interesting, I guess, to see where that goes. I do want to know where that goes. I'm curious to learn more about Rhaena. I'm curious to learn more about Baela as well. I'd like some more time with these characters. It's kind of like in this episode, we got an extended time. We got extended time with the character Tywin Lannister, and I really didn't mind that. But it's one of those things where it's like, man, I would have liked a little bit more of some of these characters being sprinkled in earlier. I think Alfred Broom is going to be very consequential if you're just going off the way they are presenting his character here. And I felt that having something like that, like his character, his depiction, if we gave just a little bit more to Thailand, I think they gave him some to work with, and I thought it was good. But if they gave him just a little bit more, I think his role here in episode 8 maybe would have delivered a little bit better. Like, I don't want to say that this is a terrible episode. It's not. It's more of a consequence or a reflection of the entire season as a whole that maybe I'm struggling with. Maybe after I give it a few days and I get a chance to actually sit down and just kind of watch each episode at my own pace. Say I watch 5 in one day and 5 the next day, something like that, and really just get enthralled into House of the Dragon again, if I can. Maybe even go back to season 1. Maybe I'll find some of these things that I thought were inconsistencies maybe aren't that bad. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I know I kind of jump around here a little bit. I'm just trying to be as casual as possible in these videos. I get comments that, criticize me for all the like and stuttering, and well, I didn't write anything down. I'm just talking to you as I'm experiencing this. If you don't like that, then, anytime you see the raw take on one of my thumbnails or in the title, don't click on it. But if you see that and you click on it and you go into the comment section to complain to me that you don't like the way that, I'm not speaking in a scripted manner, well, I'm sorry that you feel misled. That's definitely not my intention. I got grievances or complaints that I talked about the spoilers, and I didn't talk about the spoilers enough. I didn't talk about the leaks in full depth in enough detail. Well, I'm sorry. This is unscripted. I start recording and I talk about whatever is coming to mind. The only thing I want to add to this is that in the future here, moving forward, I'm still going to do some videos like this with the raw take, unscripted stuff. However, the thing that I started this channel to do was I wanted to make more long-form essay formatted videos. And I really want to get back to focusing on that. It's difficult to do it during the actual season because different things come out, leaks, stuff like that. And you're reacting very much so to each individual episode. And I wonder if that's been a reason why maybe I've been too critical of House of the Dragon, because I'm trying to analyze each and every single frame of every single episode. And I just don't think that's the appropriate way to really experience any show. I think there's two lines of thinking when you watch Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon or whatever your favorite series is. If you watch these shows and you're wanting to be analytical, you're going to watch it with that mind frame. And I don't think that's great. I think it kind of ruins it. It ruins the enjoyment. It definitely ruins the enjoyment for me. So next season, season 3, I might approach it a little bit differently, because there's been a lot about interacting with the rest of the fan base and people that are criticizing each episode, or people that are very celebratory, or offering high praise for each individual episode. And I'm listening to that, and I don't want it to influence my opinion. Make certain that I have something unique to say about the episode, and maybe I don't. Maybe I watched and I thought exactly what you did, and I don't have anything interesting to contribute. I don't know. But this was never supposed to be just like a review channel. And during this course of this second season for House of the Dragon, I feel like my channel kind of fell into that a little bit. So I want to get away from that. I want to try to analyze individual scenes and be a little bit more explorative as far as the way I experience House of the Dragon. So I'm going to go back and watch season 1 and season 2 again, and try to come from it with just more of as a fan. Because with all the criticisms that I've made about this show or this season, I am still a fan. I think if you're watching a video like this, or if you are watching House of the Dragon up until this point, there's been numerous areas where you could have turned off and been like, this isn't for me. But you're still here. And even if you're criticizing it, you're still here. You're still watching it. And so if you're like me, it means that you're still a fan. And I want to focus a little bit more on what I really enjoyed about this show so far, what I do enjoy about the source material, and get into some more essay stuff in regards to the main series, A Song of Ice and Fire, even some stuff with Game of Thrones that I still want to talk about, things I really enjoy about Game of Thrones, earlier seasons especially. And I want to get back into House of the Dragon as a fan and focus on some of the things I really enjoy. If that's something that you'd be into, great. Let me know in the comment section. If it's not something that you're into, great. You don't have to let me know in the comment section though. I'm still going to make those videos regardless. But if you'd like some more House of the Dragon content, you can go ahead and click one of these links here at the end. I'm going to go ahead and call it a night, and I'm going to get to work though, starting this week on some more scripted videos where I can really be a little bit more thorough, but also a little bit more pointed with my ideas, my thoughts. I'll still put out some of these raw take videos, but just wanted to give my subscribers, those that follow my channel, kind of an update on what I plan to do with the channel moving forward. And we'll see about these season reviews or these episode reviews. We'll see how I handle that moving forward. It's a lot easier when I love the episode. So, we've got Duncan A coming up, and I'm curious to see how the fan base responds to that. There's no dragons. I don't think there's going to be any White Walkers, but if HBO's behind it and they insist on forcing that into that series, who knows? I hope they don't. I hope they just tell the story that we have from the books, because it's really the most focused one. Yes, I will say that. It's the most focused story George R.R. Martin has offered in this series so far. From A Song of Ice and Fire, Fire and Blood, the Duncan Egg novellas are some of the best. And if you haven't read them, I highly encourage you to check them out. Duncan Egg will be out next year, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. And who knows? By then, maybe I'll be a little bit more up to reviewing each individual episode. It really just depends. That's it. All right, I'm done talking. I'm going to go to bed. I'm sure my audience retention has already been trashed on this video anyway. So, all right, I'll talk to you guys later. Go ahead and click here if you want to watch something else.